Humans do not have any venom or poison, but they will bite, and their mouth hosts the angriest microorganisms three-dimensional space has to offer. If you are made of living stuff and the human puts his mouth on you, seek immediate medical attention. I have the building and all the exhibits closed until Patrick is found and returned to his home. If you see him outside the building, do not approach. You do not know what frame of reference he is seeing you from, or which one the human stability field will collapse you into. I will be happy to reschedule or refund any tour events that may be interrupted by this closure after it is resolved. Caretaker Aqueous. There should be a dedicated sign for this. It happens enough at the center to properly laminate and seal one. Exhibit escapes in the Creatures of Lower Axis Awareness Center were supposed to be uncommon. She thought her note looked good enough and explained well. She had to make sure she grabbed the paper and pen visible across all planes. Reducing the interruption and complaint should be worth the expense. Patrick had escaped his exhibit before. It was almost inevitable with his home inside of an inverted box. Any higher dimensional being could look into it, while all he usually saw were his familiar walls. Sometimes the human stability field would solidify an open window, or he'd just walk through a wall, taking a drowsy wrong turn. This could have been a similar instance, but unusual since she hadn't had his exhibit open at all before he disappeared, and it should be impossible for him to open anything himself. This wasn't a meet-up with friends or a trip to the store either. She saw him in the center proper. None of the classes on planarily constrained engineering or architecture had been in since the last cleaning. None of the 8+ alarms had gone off over the past several months. Even the normal pranksters were more focused on a place that opened down the street. Aqueous took in a deep breath, letting the fresh air soak and suffuse through her, before wringing herself into a form the human would react better to. Questions for how and why can wait till after the current problem is solved. Until then, she'd just have to wade around in 4-axis space, while existing in only 3 dimensions as much as possible. Instead of blissful, gaseous buoyancy, she trotted around like a rock on stilts. Instead of lungs all along the inside of her limbs, she had to rely on a dedicated case to provide for the pumping of air. All her camouflage, all the aerial grace of her species, traded off to walk in search of something that was probably confused about its snacks not being anywhere it looked. So she walked, poking at every hallway and vent as she traced along the wall for support. Nothing was malleable like it usually would be. Like the human stability field, a little trail of solid space filled in wherever he went. She followed the stability, the texture of reality slowly settling into what it would look like in human space. The light no longer suffusing and reflecting from unseen gems of tangled space. Now chandeliers of glowing glass floated in arches along the ceiling. Signs and banners no longer acting as films over doorways. Instead, yawning square gaps stood under and beside these features. Instead of exit doors available at every intersection, each leading directly outside through the same doorway, now there were just signs with arrows. Cozy hallways overlapping each other were turned into wide exposed corridors, with stairs linking floors together, skylights further exposing the interior of the building to the outside sky. Now everything looked predictable, downright plain, and just a bit human. Which just made the shifting shadows and stained glass chimes more unsettling. Alien music calling from solid objects compressed and stretched to fit in a space they had never existed within before. Shadows, once faint and multitudinous, now solid, and dancing with her every sway and step. Catching her attention with each movement, expected or not. Eventually she stepped out of the corridor, bridging the exhibits, into what she could describe as a canal. Open to the air above, with tall concrete overhangs sheltering its sides, it would look like a utility space if not for the signage and colours covering the walls. And there was the human. A brick of assumptions so dense and solid, the fabric of space around him was ploughed into its shape. He noticed her and turned, his attention resting on her like an ocean. Her shoulders crushed, her limbs pressed tight, her sight wobbled and resolved into the way he saw the world. She pressed back, asserting her own form and function against his influence. You shouldn't be over there. You're making a mess for us. She sighed out like they would. She may have used more vocal cords than his species usually did. I'm a display piece. This is an awareness center. Wouldn't it serve your goals better to show why I live the way I do rather than just how? He called back. That doesn't account for compatibility, Aqueous told him. He sighed and walked back past her, grumbling about harsh looks or judgmental gazes, as the world around him groaned from the pressure being released. At least I have some place I can go when the world goes to shit. Those clear words making her shudder. No, you do not. This is a very different space that you're plowing flat just by walking around. If anyone was willing to host you, it'd be as a security measure. Her words didn't seem to discourage him, as fresh ripples of his reality washed out around him. See, I knew I could count on you. Not only do I have a place to work here, but you have a reason to keep me out. He turned to look her in the eyes. Try and poke around to stop things getting worse if you don't want me and my friends waltzing in like there's money to be made. He had followed the signs of his own creation back to his exhibit, turning and walking through an open sliding glass door into his living room, pulling it closed behind him before flopping down onto his couch. She sighed. The space around her slowly unwound, and now she had to clean up everything he'd done. If he was going to hold the entire space she lived in hostage, there were certainly worse ultimatums.